Today we'll be creating this rotating light bulb effect using Nomad Sculpt, which is available on iOS, Android, and experimental on web. Current version of Nomad that we are using is 1.82. Your interface may look slightly different if you're using a more up-to-date version. The tools provided may also look different. I have downloaded additional brushes and tools from online, but for the sake of this tutorial, we'll only be using the included tools provided by Nomad. Selecting the wireframe option from below will show the surface count of the sphere. This is represented by small squares on the surface of the sphere. The higher the surface count, the more detail and better curve. You're going to delete the default sphere and add a new one with the lower surface count, increasing the surface level over time. Select the scene menu in the upper left corner, make sure the sphere is selected, and hit the delete button. Let's add a new sphere with the Select Gizmo tool enabled. Select Gizmo can be checked by clicking the upper right corner and then tapping the sphere option. Notice the new sphere has a lower surface count than the default one, but still has maintained a smooth curve. Select the sphere in the upper left corner. Navigate to the Primitive tab. Let's change the parameter post subdivision from 5 to 2. You can use the slider or change the number in the box to the right. Changing your view can be done with a single finger grab on either the empty space or the cube above. Lock in a specific view by tapping on the surface of that space in the cube or circle in the corner. While locked into the front view, let's clone our sphere. Go to the Scene menu. With the sphere selected, choose the Clone option. You'll notice another sphere is created. Selecting the green arrow and dragging in a downward motion will allow us to see the additional cloned sphere. To focus on the current object, let's pan and zoom by using 2 fingers in the empty space. Selecting the outer ring will allow us to scale the object on all 3 axes equally at the same time. Let's position and scale this to about 1/4 of the size of the top sphere. The sphere so that the middle line is visible at the base of the other sphere. The points above the arrows allow you to scale the object on a particular axis. Let's scale on the green axis only to make it slightly longer. Let's inspect the overall shape by moving the camera around. Continue scaling and positioning until you are satisfied with the overall shape of the glass of the bulb. Once satisfied with the location, open the Scene menu, select both spheres, and navigate to the Boolean tab. Then select Boolean. This has now turned our object into a single mesh. Let's rename this from Mesh to Glass. Select the 3 dots and choose Name. Confirm by hitting OK. Now that we have the basic shape down, let's increase the surface area to add some smoothness and curve. These edges are pretty jagged, and we can make it smoother now. Select the multi-resolution menu. With multi-res selected, choose Subdivide. You'll notice the surface area is already smoother. This is because we've increased the count by 1. Let's increase it once more to add some more smoothness. We can now deselect the wireframe mode from below. The edges where the two spheres meet is still pretty hard. We can smooth this out by selecting the Smooth tool from the upper right menu. Let's set the radius to approximately 60. Set the intensity to approximately 55. Let's make sure symmetry is enabled. The additional symmetry options in the upper right will show that the x-axis is already enabled. We'll enable both the x and the z-axis, aka this blue plane and this red plane. Begin smoothing the creased area, and notice that symmetry enabled allows us to smooth 4 areas at one time. You can inspect the space to make sure that it is fully smooth all the way around. Let's toggle wireframe back on for a moment. Let's now go to the scene menu, and with the gizmo tools enabled, let's add a torus. Surface count is pretty high, so let's reduce it. Post subdivision is already at 0. In order to reduce this, we're going to go to the Topology tab and reduce that count. Let's reduce it to 6. With the front view enabled, let's reduce the size of the torus and bring it to the base of the glass bulb. We'll reduce the size by selecting the outer ring and dragging it inward. Slightly adjust the height by dragging the green axis. You can toggle the perspective view off to get a better view for alignment. Next, we will multiply the count by going to the scene menu, making sure the torus is selected, selecting Add, and choosing the curve repeater. You'll now notice a line with 2 points. Let's drag the top point to see both instances. Tapping anywhere on the line can add additional points and change the direction of the curve. Tapping any of the points in between the curve allow you to adjust the curve between angular and smooth. Points can be removed by selecting a point, dragging it to an end until they are both red, and releasing. Now, let's align the point so that it's on the green axis and straight. Let's increase the repeater count by going to the header, selecting the count option, and sliding the number up. Let's decrease the gap by adjusting the size of the line. Notice the folder structure of the torus and the curve. Let's select the curve. Let's select the Radius tab and tap it until there are 2 yellow dots present. You'll notice the 2 yellow dots are also present in the workspace. Selecting one point and sliding it will reduce the radius size. This is why we selected the curve repeater as opposed to the array repeater. To reduce the gap further, let's go to the Scene menu, select the torus, and then select Gizmo from the header. The green handle selected, we can increase the size of each shape simultaneously. Because we will no longer make adjustments to the screw, we can go to the menu and select Validate. We can now combine all the objects in the base. Let's select the torus and the curve, go to the Boolean tab, and select Boolean. This will now make it a single mesh. To fill the hole at the base of the mesh, we're going to add a cylinder. From the Scene menu, select Add, then Cylinder. This has more surface area than we need. Let's select the cylinder above, change the topology level from 66 to 12. We'll start by selecting the Gizmo tool and moving it to the base of the screw. To get a better idea if it's in the proper place, we'll use the outer ring and scale it down slightly smaller than the screw itself. Adjust the size and position so that there is no empty gap and so that the base lives slightly below the screw. To add a little more detail, we can duplicate the cylinder. Let's go to the Scene menu, select the cylinder, and clone. From there, we will move the gizmo down slightly lower and resize it slightly smaller. With both cylinders selected, let's go to the Boolean tab and select Boolean to combine them as a single mesh. We can now take a moment to rename these meshes for better organization. For the cylinder, I will rename it base. For the screw, I will rename it screw. To give the base a smoother look, let's select the base, go to the Multi-Resolution tab, and choose Subdivide. We can now turn the perspective view back on. From the Scene Selection menu, let's select all the objects, go to the Add option, and select Group. We can then rename this group Bulb. We will now toggle off the visibility by selecting the eye icons next to the object and group. Selecting the checkbox with the visibility turned off will allow you to see the object partially. For now, let's deselect the checkbox to keep the scene completely invisible. To begin creating our coil, we'll toggle on the top view and center the red and blue axis. From the upper right corner, let's select the tube. From the left-hand side, we are going to select Path and make sure B-Spline is enabled. Begin by drawing a line on your workspace. Let's add additional points to create a curve shaped like the letter C in a downward motion. Let's now confirm our selection by tapping the green point. We can adjust the thickness by selecting the yellow dot and dragging it inward. If your object is far when moving the camera around, select the square in the upper right corner to bring it back to center. From the scene menu, let's make sure the tube is selected, go to the Add option, and select the array repeater. From the array header above, let's choose the Size tab and adjust the distance of the red x-axis. Similar to the screw, adjust the slider so that both ends of the coil are visible on the screen. Once in the proper position, adjust the count by sliding the count axis. Continue adjusting the slider for the count and distance so that the space between the coils is very small. Next, let's select the tube from the scene menu. We will now select one end of the coil to connect to the other end. Feel free to add additional points to adjust the curve. While connecting the points, continue moving your camera around to make sure it is properly aligned. Perspective mode can be toggled on and off for better view. Continue adjusting, adding, or removing points as needed to get the optimal curl. Any imperfections from the connecting points will be fixed using the Smooth tool. Feel free to take your time making adjustments as needed until you get the desired curl and connections you see fit. Once satisfied with the overall shape, from the scene menu, select both the array and tube and go to the Boolean tab. Select Boolean. Let's rename this mesh coil. From the upper right menu, select the Smooth tool. Adjust the radius to approximately 90 and the intensity to approximately 50. Begin smoothing the spaces where the coils connect. Once satisfied, begin smoothing the ends so that they are more rounded. Let's go back to the scene menu and select the visibility and toggle on the bulb. Depending on the size of the coil you created, it may be very small in comparison to the bulb itself or very large. In my case, it is very small. With the bulb selected, let's choose either the home view or the front view from the upper right corner. Let's now select the coil and remove it from the outside of the bulb. In my case, it's very small and nearly impossible to see, so I'll use the outer ring to scale it up to size. We can add the coil to the group by selecting the coil and dragging it into the bulb family. With the glass mesh selected, let's go over to the Material tab. Select Refraction. We can now see inside the bulb mesh and position the coil properly inside. With the coil selected and the gizmo to enable, use the arrows to position it in the center of the glass bulb. It's not very clear to see through the glass. With the glass selected, let's go to the Materials tab and change the index of refraction to 1. It's somewhat helped, but we can adjust this even further by choosing the Paint Glossy option. Now that we can see the coil easier, let's go back to the Scene menu, select the coil, and position it using the Snap tool. With the Snap tool enabled to 90 degrees, we will rotate the coil 90 degrees. Now let's select the blue ring to move it 90 degrees. If the colors vary for you, choose the proper color and rotate as needed. You can now disable the Snap tool. Let's continue adjusting the position of the coil so that it is centered in the glass of the bulb. It is recommended to view the bulb from all angles to make sure it is properly centered. Let's add another tube to create the stem of the coil. With the Path tool enabled and the B-spline enabled, draw a line from one end of the coil to the base of the bulb. Add an additional point and curl it inward. Confirm your selection with the green point. Rotate your camera around and position the tube so that one end is connected to the base and the other end is connected to the end of the coil. Once positioned properly, let's change the shape of the coil. With the Radius tool enabled, select the upper yellow tip and drag it inward. Once satisfied with the overall position and shape, go to the Scene menu with the tube selected, select Clone. I'll take the points of the clone tube and connect them to the other end of the coil and other side of base. Let's navigate to the Scene menu. With both tubes selected, go to the Boolean tab and select Boolean. We can now rename this wire. We are now going to start adding colors and texture to our scene. With the wire selected, let's navigate to the sphere on the bottom left-hand corner. Select a color from the panel below using your pencil tool. Notice the wire is changing color in the scene. We will slide the roughness and metalness scale to give it more of a shiny look. Once you're satisfied with your selection, confirm your choice by clicking Paint All. We will repeat this process for the screw threads. You can either select any object from selecting it on the Scene menu or selecting the object directly in the scene. For the base, we are going to select the object and manually paint this. To speed up the painting time, we are going to enable symmetry both on the X and Z axis, or the red and blue axis. To make sure the painting is thoroughly covering the object, we are going to select the intensity to 100. The radius can be set to any desired amount that you wish. Let's now select a color for the base. From the color selection menu, let's choose a dark color and adjust the metalness and roughness so that it is more of a flat tone rather than a shiny tone. We will also avoid clicking Paint All. With your pencil, you can start coloring the base. Notice that it is simultaneously coloring 4 quadrants at the same time because symmetry was enabled. The purpose of manually coloring the base leaves the top of the base white on the inside and the bottom black. With the coil selected, let's navigate to the color section and give it a whitish, yellowish, light colored tone. For now, we can deselect the grid. From the upper menu, we can enable post-processing. Feel free to experiment with these options to give your scene an overall different look. Adjusting the sliders in the bloom settings will allow more or less light to pass through your scene. We're now going to go to the Shader tab and select an environment. Different environments create a different overall feel. Adjusting the exposure slider will also allow for more or less light to pass through your scene. The rotation takes the lighting, shadows, and reflections in your environment and rotates it around the objects in your scene. You can adjust the bloom slider settings similar to mine, or try other amounts of light passing through your scene. If any of your objects are not in a group, drag them so that they all fall under a hierarchy. The Background tab allows you to change the color of your backdrop to any color, or change it to an environment. With the environment selected, you can change the amount of blur or exposure entering your scene. Set the blur level high enough so that we can't actually see the images. You'll notice the shadows and lights still pass through the background of our scene. The bulb group selected, we are now going to add a curve repeater, multiplying our bulbs. Let's expand our curve menu and adjust our curve. Adjusting the overall curve shape and size will give the bulb their own direction. When satisfied with the curve, we can increase the count from the slider menu above. Adjusting the radius parameter will automatically scale the bulbs to different size. Adjusting the twist parameter will add a little bit more variety to their direction. Let's now select Validate with Keep Instances enabled. Let's repeat this process to create more bulbs. While adjusting this curve, let's take an opportunity to rotate our camera around to give the bulbs a more random look. When satisfied, validate with instances kept and repeat once more. From the scene menu, we are now going to add an array repeater. Adjusting the count in the array header will increase the amount of bulbs on that axis. You can space these out further by adjusting the size on each axis. Pinching to zoom in will allow you to see if the bulbs are overlapping on each other. If so, you can adjust the slider count and size as needed. Once validated, you may notice some triangle-shaped marks that represent your grouped objects. To export your image, let's go to the folder menu, scroll to the bottom under the render section. We can output the image size to standard sizes or a custom size. Before exporting, let's adjust our camera so that we get the proper image we want. If you see a warning message, it's a good practice to save your render and also reduce the resolution size using the width slider. To create the rotating effect, we are going to go to the upper left corner, select the turntable option. Adjust your speed, rotation center, and toggle on turntable. We can now use any screen capture software to save this as a video. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to comment, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. Thanks for watching.